Hello, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is Dante Williams. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about red flags to prevent ghosting. Check this out. All right, folks. So I'm sure many of you have been in the position where you're hiring someone or interviewing someone for a position or in a volunteer capacity, maybe in an internship, many different plethora of different ways that folks are doing interviews. And I'm sure many of you who have been in that decision-making role or part of the committees have had the experience where you interview somebody that you think is going to work out, and you call them to either schedule the next part of the interview or just to get additional information from them, or maybe even send the offer letters to them. And they don't respond back to you. They don't even call you back. They don't you text them. They don't text you. Nothing. There's no communication. Well, friends, that's being ghosted. And simply ghosting means that, you had someone that was once communicating with you, having dialogue with you about a job or position or whatever, and decided just simply to not have the common decency and courtesy to have closure. I think what makes ghosting such an emotional thing, especially for like our hiring managers and things, is that arguably there's nothing more stressful in work related, and data suggests this, than A, hiring a new person, and then B, having to replace a person, especially if that person was highly skilled. So in that context, super stressful, right? Terrible, like, oh my God, this is awful. So when someone ghosts you, there's a lot on the line for you, which evokes this emotional response. You get upset. Ultimately too, folks, we don't like to be rejected. And so when you're ghosted, that feeling of rejection comes out. It's a human feeling. So those are some of the emotional aspects of ghosting, but there are red flags maybe that we do or don't notice necessarily while we're interviewing folks, or while we're, discussing, whether they'd be a good fit or having dialogue with them. There are red flags, folks. And one of those red flags that I've noticed doing this work as a recruiter and working in HR, one of the red flags is if the person is not sure about whether or not the position is actually a good fit. So when someone's in the job market, pretty much everybody's applying for what they think is a good fit. Some jobs are a good fit and some jobs are just way out of their ballpark, right? But everybody's typically applying for more than one job. And with that in mind, we're a part of that selection process. And let's say, for example, you're hiring for a third shift job that's typically difficult to fill. The person says, hey, this will be a good fit for me. I'm excited to work here. And then, like I said, they don't even show up, or they do accept the offer. And then within 3 days, they just stop showing up to work, which is typically common, in entry level roles. But we do see that in middle management types of roles and stuff too. I'll say it like this: the higher the wages, the less likely that's happening typically, right? There's less social punishment for ghosting at the mid to lower levels. Now, don't get me wrong, at the upper management levels, that can happen too as well, or it can look a different way where maybe they're not staying in the full duration of time that's needed, right? That could be a type of ghosting. But that typically happens from entry to mid-level position. So the higher the wages, the less likely that's to occur. Also, too, the more specialized the skill is, the less likely that is as well, because circles are small and folks talk. The world is, I know there's 8 billion people on the planet, but the world is still very small and word travels very quickly. And if you're ghosting people in a highly specialized field, you end up getting to a place where you are known as unhireable. So, but in these position groups I'm talking about, where this really typically happens, where you're hiring somebody, they think it's a good fit and it just doesn't pan out. So the number one thing is that the position actually doesn't work for them. They're trying to make the position work. Okay. There's a difference of it being an aptitude that works for your family with the wages, the way you're living your lifestyle, and trying to cram. I'll put it this way as an analogy: the cylinder block does not fit into the triangle block. Those little blocks that we used to have as kids. It doesn't fit. So, but folks try to make it fit. And after a while, something ends up giving out, whether that's the performance or whether that they find something different. So number one, the position actually doesn't work for them. Number two, timeliness of responses. Okay. Now we say typically email at this point, email is about anywhere from 4 to 6 hours typically of a response time, I think, for applicant. That's still slow, I know, but that's kind of the grace and leeway, because you could be trying to say maybe they're at work, whatever. Okay. But you got about 4 to 6 hours to respond to email. If it's been 24 to 48 hours and they have not given you a response as an applicant, that is very concerning, and you should be concerned about that. I wouldn't say it's enough to completely eliminate the person, but they're definitely on the lower end of the applicant pool that's there, right? Because why is it taking so long for you to respond? Is this not an important role? Is this not something that you really want to do? Is there other opportunities that you're entertaining? Or are you that busy in your life that you don't want to engage with this part of I'll say it like this, hiring is a lot like dating, right? So if you're trying to date someone and you don't respond within a timely manner, it makes the person feel like you don't really want to engage further in this type of dynamic anymore, okay? Whether they're aware of it or not, but that is a red flag. So number two is timeliness of responses. Like I said, you give them around 4 to 6 hours, 24 hours max, maybe 48 hours if it's the weekend or something like that, okay? Typically, but if they're not responding within a timely period and their responses don't seem as though they are still, when I say enthusiastic, I'm not saying they have to be like rah, rah, rah. Oh my God, I'm giving you social cues, right? Because sometimes folks are just trained, part of the interview process is a lot about social cues. Not even necessarily whether you care about the job. It's can a person sometimes demonstrate social cues that we are used to, right? Are they excited? Are they smiling? That doesn't necessarily mean that they care about the job. That just means that they've observed that these are cues that people like, okay? That doesn't necessarily equivalent to that. But if the person still doesn't seem like they're engaged or excited about the opportunity, that is a red flag. So number three is, how many jobs do they have listed on their resume? How many jobs they have listed on their resume? Now, what I mean by that is, if they've worked at one job every 6 months that are relatively the same position. Now, I want to also clarify too that the job market right now, folks are not staying at jobs for 10 years typically anymore, unless it's a position that's a dream job and that's something that, again, it's highly specialized and highly skilled. In this market right now, we would say roughly 2 to 3 years is a good time period for a person to stay at a job or a position. Now, if it's promotionally based, that's different. So I've also seen people that say, well, they've been at that job for a year and then they went to another place and they worked there for 2 years. It's okay, but what was the nature of them leaving that first job? Well, they wrote on the resume, it's a pay increase. It's a promotion. Promotionally based moves are different. If you're going lateral, relatively the same industries, that may be problematic, right? You're going from one job to the next job to the next job to the next job. Then they don't even list their supervisors at all in any of their references that they're using. That also is too problematic, right? Because I'm not saying that they have to have a million different references from supervisors, but at least a few, right? So if the person that had supervised them and they had worked under them can't vouch for their skill sets, that may also be a red flag as well. So if they have multiple jobs in rapid succession, that again is something that's concerning, and keep that in mind. Again, I'm not saying this should be something that we just, throw somebody out right away of the pool, but fester on that. Keep that in the back pocket, because if they're going from job to job, and they can't seem to maintain that for a while, that's concerning. I think sometimes applicants have the misconception, the misunderstanding that multiple jobs in multiple capacities is a good thing. It's not. What we're really looking for is multiple jobs, sure, but duration of multiple jobs and promotions in different industries or different organizations or companies. That's what we're really looking at. The ideal candidate, we're saying, okay, they've worked at a place for, even if they're younger folks too, right? Like I think there's also a level of discrimination as it relates to ageism on both ends of the spectrum, right? For our Gen Z, Gen Y, millennial friends, and then also to our Gen X friends too. There's discrimination in both camps, right? So, because I've seen that. So one of the things is that with our younger crews or more or less seasoned folks, job to job, 1 year, you're staying at a place, 2 years, you're staying at a place. There's also the assumption that, well, they're job hopping. Nah, not necessarily. Again, the game has changed. This isn't 1970. The game has changed quite a bit. There's a lot of jobs. Nowadays, there are a lot of jobs. There's a lot of companies that are willing to do things differently than other organizations that make it more advantageous to join. Okay. So that's another thing that I think is important to point out and to think about and recognize is like, where are they going? You know, are they being promoted? Because if they're being promoted every 2 years, they're doing something new, they're getting promoted. Well, you got a rock star candidate potentially on your hands. But if you don't change the lens and understand the zeitgeist, the culture, the normalcy of the time period that we're in right now, you'll say the rock star is not a rock star, and you miss out on them. Those are the tips I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you wouldn't mind liking, sharing, and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. And I will catch you all next time.